Yeah, I'm having myself a Yeti, a Colorado Imperial Stout. It's one of those dark beers that I've learned to really love lately. It's got a real good roast kind of a taste to it and everything. God, look at that head! Look at that head on that. And it's very nice aromas and stuff. And yeah, I'm gonna be talking about RPG stuff. It's not about just beer porn or anything like that, but I am going to be enjoying a beer as I talk bullshit and talk shop with you about role-playing games because I need the community's help with a little problem I'm having with my style of running games that I can't really come up with an answer on my own, and I would very much welcome everybody's input on the problem I've had. I'm gonna get to that in a minute. That's a good imperial stout right there. So anyway, the problem that I've been having is that I tend to run my campaigns in a very narrativist kind of style. I don't usually like to use labels like that on people's games because just about everyone's style of running a game is different from somebody else. But when I use the term narrativist, you know pretty much what I'm kind of going for with my style, as opposed to something completely different. And if you've watched the live game sessions that I've posted on my channel, you'll also have a very clear idea of how I like to run my games. The problem is that my kind of inspiration to run my games in such a style comes from my love of stories in other mediums. Like I love reading books, I love watching movies, I love writing and drawing comics and reading comics and all sorts of stuff like that. And they all follow kind of similar way of narrating the story with lots of course, variables here and there, but still, it's mostly about this, about this journey of protagonist characters, and it doesn't need to be all Joseph Campbell's hero's journey level, but still it's like, okay, you have these protagonist characters and you follow their journey all throughout the whether it's adventure or like some drama stuff or whatever. And with that, what you have is something that's not interactive the same way role-playing games are, because role-playing games are they're interactive and they're you collaborate with your other players. Everybody contributes to the story, and it's just that other players have narrative control over different things that another one has. So, I approach the hobby and the way I like to run my games and the way I like to play my games as well in this way that, okay, all of us around the table, we're here to enjoy a story, enjoy telling a story, enjoy crafting a story, enjoy crafting a narrative and whatnot. We're creating characters and we're enjoying the drama unfolding about, their adventures and whatnot. The game aspect, of course, is a lot of fun on top of that, but for me, it's what's on top of that. To me, it's the story first and the mechanics there to support the story and to support having fun, because the element of randomness and all this stuff brings lots of fun to it, because just telling a story can easily get boring without the random element in there. Anyway, the problem is that every time I'm finished with a campaign, I always approach the players with questions about criticisms and opinions and what they felt was kind of missing in the game, and stuff they liked, stuff they didn't like, and where there's room to improve. Because when you really care about any field, especially a creative field or anything like that, you wish to improve in it. And if you can't take criticism, you can't improve because you can't acknowledge the problems and whatnot. The thing is that in my campaigns, I tend to pace my stories in kind of a similar way as a season of a TV show does, or something of that kind of that's the best example I always like to use as a reference, because I usually create my campaigns to last something like 13 sessions, something like that. And I've experimented with different things, like just making them longer, making very extended preludes and prologues before the actual campaign that lasts that 13 sessions gets rolling. But it pretty much tends to come up. The same problem I usually get criticism for from my players tends to come up, and I haven't come up with a good way of handling it, or so I'm craving for a fresh approach, somebody else's opinion and take on that, to where I can look at it from a new perspective and actually kind of put it under a looking glass and whatnot. The problem is that players oftentimes don't feel they have the time to organically and naturally kind of get into their personal character drama growth and arc. When I come up with a campaign and the story, it's very like, I don't make scripts. No way. There's no way I'm going to be writing down a script. The thing is that I come up with a basic idea of a plot. Let's say let's say there's going to be a big evil who's going to return as the climax kind of thing, and there's going to be like the big evil has followers and cultists and whatnot. So I'm going to craft the stories like the skeletal structure of the story as, okay, there's going to be a climax of that big evil, making their presence known and showing themselves, and the kind of curtain is going to be lifted, and this kind of big old is going to come out, and the players are going to face it and take it down and save everybody. And the campaign leading up to that climax is going to be filled with different stuff that gives hints of that, gives clues of that for the players to chew on and make kind of, investigative, things, that sort of stuff. And everything between, all the meat on those bones, I craft from the player characters' personalities, their backstories, all sorts of relationship kind of drama that I can muster. If somebody makes a character with a lost sister, I'm going to make storylines into that. I'm going to slab clay on that skeletal structure of that statue. That's the game. I'm going to be slapping more clay on okay, I need some side stories about the sister. That, and then some other player is going to be having like backgrounds for his character where he is looking for someone to get vengeance on, or something like that. Okay, more stuff for me to slap on to this story. And usually the story is all throughout fleshed out by the character drama. Major villains are usually tied to some player character or all the player characters. The person or the people getting rescued are tied to the player characters. Everything is tied to the player characters. It's anything but a kind of a default adventure where anybody can throw any kind of player character to, and it'll play out the same way or more or less. It's anything but that I'm aiming for. The thing is that my personal response to a question like this about, how do I give the players enough room to organically and naturally have those kind of character moments where they bring up their more vulnerable and personal problems and whatnot in a story, would just be to just throw a lot of moments between the scenes of action, adventure, and plunder and whatnot, where the characters are kind of just laying back. Whether they're in a diner sitting down behind a table just talking shop, or whether they're around a campfire, or whether they're visiting some sort of a ruler and just kind of he says that, okay, we'll leave tomorrow, but for the night, mikasa sukasa, make yourselves at home, and they have all the night to themselves to do all sorts of stuff. The thing is that I do all that, In my Midnight City campaign, for example, there's like, well, I would say something like every third session, there's moments when the characters go to their base of operations, and it's up to the characters when they want to start hauling ass again, because there's constant, opportunities to, display heroics and stuff like that, because the city is in a lot of trouble. Or they go to a diner and they just kind of sit down, have themselves a bite to eat and all that stuff. And if it's been long enough, I mentioned that, okay, you're starting to feel fatigue and you're starting to get hungry and whatnot, and usually the players always kind of like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing. As soon as we're done with this little thing that's, that we're in the middle of, we're gonna go and rest up and whatnot. So there's always been kind of like chances to have those kind of resting moments, but the character stuff still doesn't really organically come up. And it's because I think because if you have a campaign where it's like 13 sessions long and there's constant stuff being thrown at you, all of a sudden you realize that actually in this game world, this entire adventure, this huge adventure thing is really like taking place within only a couple of days. And if you think about the characters and think about the world through the eyes of the characters, within that time, it's very natural not to just divulge your personal, vulnerable, things. If you're struggling with traumatic history, or if you're out to avenge someone who's like killed someone you love or something like that, after knowing somebody for a couple of days, you're usually not gonna be divulging information like that because you'll feel vulnerable. You don't trust them that way yet. So a lot of times players will engage in that sort of personal stuff because they notice that, okay, I see the climax looming in the horizon. I see how the story is developing. I see kind of where we're at with this kind of highs and lows. So if I want to get into this stuff, now is the time to start laying the groundwork for it. Because oftentimes people will find themselves like about to go to the main villain's like hideout, and you're about to enter the climax, and you kind of realize that, yeah, there's a lot of stuff on my character background that didn't really get addressed. We didn't really dive into that. So you either kind of go that, okay, there's so little time left that I'm just gonna bull rush into that stuff now right before the end, where it might feel forced, or you're going to just, it doesn't feel natural to kind of just shove that shit, into the game now. So I guess I kind of either missed my boat, or maybe there's going to be another campaign where it will come out more naturally or something. And when you have a bookshelf full of games like I have right there and all that stuff, there's games upon games that you really want to get into. So it's very likely that you're not going to be returning to the same game very soon, and especially not the same characters, because every time you start a new campaign, you want to try something new, at least with me. So oftentimes, if a campaign ends with a lot of character stuff that you didn't end up getting into, it's like, so that's lost in the void now. Only I have the knowledge of this stuff, and we can only speculate with pretty much everything regarding to that stuff, that what could have been, unless there's some sort of spin-off stuff about characters' backgrounds and whatnot. But that's a different thing. The thing is that with just another thing that comes into one's mind as a suggestion of what to do with a problem like this is, okay, well, don't make a campaign last like 13 sessions. How about you make it last 25 sessions and kind of spread the same story and stretch it further and give more time to do stuff that's perhaps not directly linked to the main story, something that's, completely, whatever. You see a cool monster in a monster manual, just come up with a neat little adventure where they kind of go and rescue people from these monsters or whatnot. But the thing is that for example, from the campaigns that are posted on this channel, the werewolf campaign, I experimented with giving all the players expansive prelude sessions that lasted for like 3 to 4 sessions for each player, which, at the same time added a lot of character moments and character kind of personal stuff into it, and kind of underlined a lot of drama that was delved into when the actual campaign, that again lasted something like 13 sessions, would start after that. There's the kind of problem where when you run the prelude for the first guy, by the time you're finished with the last guy, the first guy hasn't gotten to play in ages. So, that's kind of a problem. And also, when you stretch the campaign like that, there's another problem that kind of appears. Oh man, that's so good. There's like like I've had this before, and I'm no like I don't have the terminology when it comes to beers in my head, but the kind of dark roast kind of taste to it. The kind of not so much smoky aroma. There's sweetness. It's really sweet. It's kind of like it's perfect as a kind of dessert or something like that. Oh, I love this. Too bad I don't have any Cubans in my cabin at this point. I kind of smoked the last one on my 30th birthday a little while ago, but yeah, that would have been really good after this. Very nice. So yeah, back into the subject. So the other problem that arises, at least for me, when you stretch the campaign longer and thereby try to solve the problem, the new problem is that the campaign starts to stagnate. When I look at the 13 session long campaign, if you count the prelude of the Midnight City campaign that I ran, it took about 9 months, because a lot of sessions were kind of pushed back because of people's personal lives. And, I'm one of those people that as long as you let me know and let all the other players know you can't make it next session, I'm glad to, just push the session further. It's not a big deal. The big deal is when you just don't show up and everybody's canceled their personal stuff in order to play, and now you just can't play. Anyway, that the size of a campaign of 13 sessions took about 9 months in real life time. So if you were to run something like a 25 session thing and the campaign would last something like over a year, I have that sort of a tendency where I can't wait to get to the next new thing. So basically, when you stretch a campaign like that, I first of all would start to kind of get bored with the campaign setting and would be just looking at my shelf aching like, I really want to play this and I really want to try this for the first time, and as soon as this campaign is over I really want to get into this and that. And that's a bad attitude to have when you're in a creative situation. If somebody is like just waiting for this whole campaign to be finished and not really that inspired, that's kind of detrimental. Of course, that's very personal, ranging from person to person, but I know that my kind of span of where I can keep my interest up, it tends to vary. I need a lot of hype to keep it up, but yeah, it's kind of messed that way. The other thing is that whereas a lot of players feel that in my campaigns there's like stuff getting constantly bombarded at them, where even when I throw stuff like situations where they have the free time to just kind of relax and sit back and sit in a diner or at a campfire, they still feel that there's this constant loom of, okay, if we sit down and relax, we're being kind of selfish because there's trouble right over there. So we better just, recharge our batteries and just, be fresh in the morning and just kind of grab the bull by the horns and go solve that problem that we're in the middle of solving in this campaign and all that. To where this constant anxiety might be a stretch, but still this kind of realization that when you're relaxing, you're not really relaxing. You're just kind of waiting for yourself to jump on the next problem as soon as possible. And and also when you do that stretching thing, it often feels a bit like filler. It does, there's nothing wrong with filler. It's just that um, maybe it's just my personal concern where I keep throwing stuff at the players just so to alleviate concern that they might get bored. The players never get bored when the players are just chatting to one another. They love that stuff. I love watching that stuff, but I do have that concern that, oh, I hope that nobody thinks this is boring. Monsters, that sort of response, and that's not perhaps the best response in the world, but still, I would very much like to hear people's responses to this, either in the comments or especially a response video. I would love to get some response videos to this, to where you help me with solving the problem of how best to tackle pacing. When you watch a movie, when you read a book, when there's problems with pacing, it gets boring. It doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. It doesn't feel like it's driving it to the point. It doesn't feel like it's heading to that climax. It doesn't feel like it's tight. I like campaigns to be tight, the stories to be tight, not tight in the way that it's scripted. I kind of do bullet points in each session. I kind of think that, okay, I want to accomplish this, and if they go meet this NPC, if it goes badly, there's going to be a reaction along the lines of this. If it goes well, there's a reaction along the lines of this. That's the amount of prep and scripting, I guess, because I'm always kind of also concerned with people thinking I'm railroading them. It's just that I like to, as a GM and as a player, I like to assert a lot of narrative control, and I invite players to grab control themselves. It's kind of like, if you're sparring in a contact sport, if you're dancing, even if you're a pro wrestler or something like that, there's this interactive thing where somebody is the one who leads, more or less, and you want the other one to assert control as well, so that it's not like about domination. Domination is not fun. If you're sparring with someone, it's not fun if you're dominating them. You want them to give stuff back to you. That's what I want to do when I'm running a narrativist style campaign, where even though I get concerned with being railroady, because I like to throw stuff at the players, I like to have a very clear image of keeping the story tight, keeping it so that the story of the characters, the story that's built around the characters, has good pace, where it moves forward, where new stuff is happening, but it all is stuff that supports the story of the characters, and they have a very nice, satisfying arc where they start from one place as confused and inexperienced and out, kind of stranger in a strange land, kind of beginning, and by the time the campaign ends, they've gone through experiences that have changed them for the better somehow. And I kind of like to do that, but the problem is, like I described before, with it coming naturally to the players. It can be because the players are used to a different kind of pace, but still, I feel that there's a lot of merit to the criticisms I've been given, and the kind of there's a lot of room for me to grow as a GM, and I want that. I want to be challenged on that, and I want to grow, and I've exhausted my own resources in how to go about doing that, and that's why I'm turning to you, the YouTube role-playing game community, the RPG Brigade. So yeah, it's one of these videos after a long time. So it's good to be back, and and please hit me with one of those response videos or comments, and help me out with this, because I really I really want the help. And yeah, have yourself a Yeti Imperial Stout. They know how to make them in Colorado. So yeah, here's to you. See ya. Oh man, that's good.